This is a reskinning of a question that was sent to me by a student. I believe it originally came from Khan Academy. I just changed some numbers around. It's basically the same question. And we're given this function in terms of I and M of this firm's profit. And we want to know what will happen to P if we double the I. So a very common question you'll see on the SAT and on the ACT math tests, where you're given an equation, you have to change one of the variables and determine what happens to the value of the function overall in an abstract way. And you could do this abstractly. I think even in the solution to this, Khan Academy recommends plugging in, like in this case, 2I for I and then seeing how it compares. You could do that, but frankly, I think that's a bit confusing. And I think there's an easier way to do it, which is plugging in. Now, we're going to assume that you don't have access to a calculator on a question like this. If it's on the SAT, that is a possibility. Because if you had a calculator, it's really simple because you just plug in the numbers and the calculator does all the work for you. But we're going to assume that we don't have a calculator. So you can see what you would do in the worst case scenario. But if you do have a calculator, if this is a ACT question, then it's even easier. So what we're going to do is come up with two cases. We're going to come up with case one, plugging in a value for I and for M and get a P out of that. And then we're going to look at case number two, which is going to be plugging in a different set of numbers and seeing how the value changes. Now, the trick about this is that the actual numbers don't really matter. Like the 405 here doesn't really matter. If this were 400 or if this were 100 or 1,000, each of these numbers, it's not going to make a difference at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this from 405 to 400 just to make our math a little bit easier. We could do this with 405. It just makes the long division a bit more annoying. I'm going to change these to 400 because in the end, the function is going to operate in the same fashion regardless of what I do, what these numbers are. So let's pick some numbers. Let's first change this to 400 over 400 minus I times M. And now let's come up with our two cases. So in case one, let's make M2, just keep things simple. And let's make I, let's say 100. Use simple numbers when you can. It'll make your math a lot easier. So in case number one, we're going to get 400 over 400 minus 100 times 2. 400 over 400 minus 100 is 400 over 300, which is 4 over 3 times 2. Gets me 8/3. Now, let's now double the I for the second case. We're going to keep M the same because they don't say anything about M, so we're just going to keep it as it is. So M is still 2. But now I is 200. Okay, so let's see what happens. We're going to get 400 over 400 minus 200 times 2. So I'm going to get 400 over 400 minus 200 is 400 over 200, which is just 2. And 2 times 2 is 4. So we look at the change and we see what happens. Well, 8/3, first things first, we know it increases. So we can get rid of B, we can get rid of D. Because in both cases, we know the value is increasing as we increase the I. And this makes sense because as we increase the I, this difference gets smaller, right? Because you're subtracting by a bigger number. And if this difference in the denominator is smaller, the overall value of the function will be bigger because you're dividing by a smaller number. So it actually makes sense abstractly why it should increase at the very least. But notice it's not doubling. If it doubled, it would be 16/3, and 16/3 is around 5 1/3. So this actually less than doubles. So that's why the answer here is going to be choice C. Now I think it's actually possible, maybe, depending on the numbers, for it to actually double, but it's not always going to double. It depends on the numbers that you plug in. Maybe not. Maybe it actually won't always double. In any event, the fact of the matter is it doesn't double in this case, so we know it's not going to be A, and it's going to be choice C. And like I said, if you had done 405, it would have worked just the same. The math would have just been a little bit more annoying. I mean, I guess you could have done 405 over 405 minus 5, and then 405 or 405 minus 10, and you're going to see there it's not doubling. Like either way, just by simple approximations and estimations, you'll see that it's not doubling, really no matter what you plug in. But we can simplify the numbers because really the relationships are what matter here. And either way, we're going to get choice C because it does double, or it does increase, but it doesn't double. To learn more about Reason Prep's SAT, SAT subject test, and ACT video courses, go to reasonprep.com/enroll, and you can find the link in the description below the video.